so I was talking about this security mechanism, right? So if you go over here and you can set all the IP ranges over here, and in that fashion, basically your integration is becoming secured. So you can do a deep dive into this. Okay, so suppose you want to create a user, and that particular user basically you want to use always for the API, right? So whenever the third-party system or any other system wants to hit or wants to integrate with your application, that time you want that particular user ID to use. You want to give the same only one user ID to them, right? So that time basically you can go to the profile, you can go to the specific profile over here, and inside that particular profile, if you just add a permission set, if you try to add a permission set over here, right? So in the permission set, what happens, there is an API user, there is a property, right? So all those things, I'm not going into that particular details. So these are the mechanisms basically which you can use. Coming to the network security, I discussed about that the login hours, IP ranges, the org-wide IP address list, right? I discussed the data, okay? Data, I think that you people must be aware. Nowadays, everything, whenever you give a FLS, whenever you give an object level access inside a profile, that is nothing but you are maintaining your data model secure, isn't it? You are making your a particular object secured to give only read access, not the write access, or you want only the view all access, not the modify all access. These are the mechanism of a data security, so that anybody cannot come and cannot update a particular object details, right? Coming to the integration security. So what happens when a particular application integrates with another application, there are some mechanisms that actually happens in build, okay? There are some mechanisms which has to maintained, which has to always in sync, which should be in sync between the two applications. So for that, basically there is a certification required, okay? While I'm talking about certification, so the certification, this is nothing about a real-time something certification. This is something like a particular, you can say that it is an inbuilt encrypted details, which details is maintained with your source application along with your target application. Assume your banking application wants to hit your Salesforce application. The banking application should have that particular certification or the certificate. That certificate should be there into your Salesforce application as well. Nowadays, that certificate, there are varieties type of certificates available into the market. If you just type just type in Google that what are the currently certificates available inside market, you would be getting many certificates. Among them, guys, the SSL is one of the most, widely used certificate. So when I'm talking about SSL, you do not have to do anything. So you can ask me, Shayanto, do I need to install SSL? No. Do I need to take care of anything about SSL? No. Do I need to configure SSL? No, nothing you require. Because what happens when Salesforce people actually gives you the environment, this SSL automatically inbuilds most of the cases, not all the cases, but most of the cases. So, but this particular SSL certificate, the same certificate is basically available in other application as well. If it is a banking application, let's assume it's a restaurant application, which they want to integrate with your Salesforce. So they are also maintaining a SSL certificate so that when the integration happens in real time, what the request the banking application sends and what the response your Salesforce application gives back to them, both can be easily understandable, and that particular understandable things can happen with this common certificate. Okay. I hope this might be clear. If you have any questions, we can discuss later. Okay. Now the SSL certifications also have some restriction. It actually depends on what are the ports you are using. If you go to some network person, they will do this IP config in your command prompt, and they will just give you the details that what are the port your computer or your laptop is using, right? So your SSL is also dependent on those port numbers. Okay, so there are two types of protocol we know nowadays. One is HTTP, one is HTTPS. What is the HTTPS, which is secured? One is non-secured, right? When we are using that HTTP actually involves with port 80. If it is HTTPS, that particular HTTPS we use generally from 1024 to 66535 port numbers. All these things you can get the details when you go and sit with some network person, with some network administrator. Okay, in general we doesn't deal with this. We deal with username, password never expires, then API users, all this stuff. Coming to the overview, so let's assume a use case. A banking application, a HDFC application, they wants basically to hit our Salesforce application. How that particular integration you would be establishing? First thing, what will happen? I will not go the details of the APIs, web services. The first thing what it will happen, we discussed so far that it will check that what is the banking application request is coming from. Is it coming from a proper IP address? Is it coming from in the proper timings which we have defined in our Salesforce system? Is it coming within the IP ranges? If all are yes, okay, fine. Let HD application get into our application, take the details from our application, and let them be happy. But if not, then what are the mechanisms? Suppose it is not from a IP which we have defined, or generally we haven't, let's assume that we haven't defined any IP at all. Okay, we didn't define any IP at all. What will be happening in that case? In that case, there must be some IP ranges which your organization must be using, right? If you are working for IBM must be using some IP ranges, the org-wide, right? It will see that whether that particular request which is coming from the IP where the banking HDFC Bank is hosting their application, it is within that limit. If yes, right, it's all good. If it is no, still if it is no, then what is happening? The token things comes into the picture. Where the token things comes into the picture, you go to the application, you go to your particular details, and you just click on your settings, right? So if you click on your settings, you would be able to see there is a sentence called reset my security token. So guys, this is nothing but all about a mechanism, that mechanism which can be secured, right? So if you just do this reset my security token, what will happen? The security token will be resetted and it will go to this particular email ID. With this particular security token, you can provide or you can give it back to HDFC Bank, and you can say them that, boss, you just use this particular security token and hit our application, involve into our application. We don't care that whether the login hours, we don't care about all the IP ranges and all the stuffs. Okay, so now this is the first overflow or the first mechanism. So this is the basic or the generic things which we discussed about all of our integration mechanisms and the security about integrations. Now coming to the main topic, right, which is the web API. Let's assume the web services API. First, put some basics on the definition. We know what is the request reply. We know what is the synchronous process. If we know what is request reply, if we know what is synchronous process, right? That means that that is a perfect ideal scenario for your web services. Okay. If you know that my integration would be based upon these two parameters. We want to request something to the external system, and we want to get some response. We know that it would be asynchronous, right? And also along with that, the data format, right? We want our data should be in XML format, okay? So if those three conditions actually matches, and also we know that there would be a significant amount of data would be transferring or interacting. HDFC Bank request us all my name, all my address details, all my beneficiary name details, all my company's details. So there is a good amount of data, let's assume in that case. And once they will request us, we have to respond back to them with a proper details, right? So they are requesting, we are responding. So it is asynchronous. And this particular data, let's assume that it is in XML format. In that case, you can assume that it can be an web services API. So you can see this diagram, right? So basically an external system, let's assume a HDFC application, they are requesting this particular XML, and what happens to the internet, basically they are getting the response, right? Now, when we talk about the web services, so remember one thing, the web services basically all depends on a particular language or a particular file. That is called your web service description language, WSDL. What is WSDL? What does it do? So it is nothing but a structure. Okay, so that structure basically has all the important information so that the HDFC application can interact with your Salesforce application. What are the various important structure it has? It has types, it has message, it has port type, and it has bindings. Okay, what does type do? Type basically defines the data type used by the web services. What is the message? What is the data element? Okay, so I can say that the I can say, if you see my example over here, right? So here, what is the message name, right? So the message name basically I am defining as get term request, and then I am defining that particular get term request. If it is a message, then that particular message type will be always string. Now, what will happen if you try to give instead of string a particular integer value? Definitely it won't accept. Okay, so these are the things basically a WSDL contains, and a WSDL actually performs the operation based upon these 4 parameter: types, message, port type, and binding. Okay, I'll come details when I'll show you some WSDL in practical. I'll just walk you through the details of that particular structure. Now, type of the WSDL. Okay, so the type of the WSDL in Salesforce, basically we do have 2 types of WSDL. One is your enterprise, one is your partner. Okay, what is the enterprise? What happened when I am working in my Salesforce application? I want that particular, and let's assume that I am working in my Salesforce application and I have generated a WSDL file. Now your question should be, how can I generate the WSDL file? I'll show you. Okay, so time being, you can assume that the enterprise WSDL is specific to your org, which org you are currently working, which org you are defining your object data, which org you are write down your code. If you are generating a WSDL file or web services file, that is your basically a enterprise level. This object are strongly typed. This WSDL file will hold all the object name and hard-coded values of the object name. Okay, when I say hard-coded values of object name, means it will hard-code your all standard object like account, like contact, like your a custom object which you create __ C. So every details of that basically would be a hard-coded value. So that means this WSDL won't work if you change the org. Suppose you are working with your Salesforce application, which name, the name of the Salesforce application is this one, the Scienta ACS-DVD, and I have generated a WSDL file from here. That means it is a enterprise WSDL, because all the things whichever I will be generating from this particular application would be very much this org specific. Okay, whatever the operation the third-party system will operate or do, right? So they have to imply whatever the details I have written or I have configured inside here. Well, however, the partner WSDL, that is not the case. The partner WSDL, you don't care about all these specific org. It is all about a generic term. Okay, in the generic term, when I'll tell that time, the WSDL file will contains a very much generic term called any object. Okay, so if you see a partner WSDL, there the object name would be specified. It can be account, it can be contact, but if you see the partner WSDL, there the object name will be any type, so that you can pass any object. You can pass account, you can pass contact, anything. Okay, but the problem would be that particular WSDL won't be implying all the rules and regulations which you have configured under your org. Generally, partner WSDL, we do not use that much because it is a loosely coupled and it is an abstract data type as object, mostly used by partners. Okay. So that is the reason, as there are no objects defined, it's basically flexible to use. That's correct. It is flexible to use, but by the partner. But when you would be working with some client, the client all cares about which particular application they are hitting. They are hitting the sign the ACS dev, this particular URL or which URL. So though it is not flexible, but it will imply all the rules and regulation defined by this particular org, right? So that is the difference between your enterprise WSDL and the partner WSDL. I have just discussed about this particular topic, and these are defined over here. So if you see the enterprise WSDL, it is strongly typed, where a partner is loosely typed, tied to a specific configuration of Salesforce, but whether the partner is useful for any configuration, because it is anything. I mean, it is an abstract data type, right? Okay, so now coming to the next thing, which is the SOAP, right? So now the second thing would be, before going to the SOAP and WSDL, let's navigate through the application. So let's assume I was just discussing with you that how you can generate a WSDL file, right? Anytime if you just go to setup, okay, so go to setup, and under setup, if you go to API, application is super fast, guys. I'm extremely sorry. Okay, so if you go to APIs, right? So integration, under integration APIs, anytime if you go to this particular option, okay, you would be seeing the varieties of web services or WSDL generating motors over here. These are nothing but, you can say, WSDL generating motors. Okay, so here you can just create a enterprise WSDL. You can just create a partner WSDL. You can create a Apex WSDL. You can create a metadata WSDL. Okay, there are various type of WSDL. What is basically your different WSDL? If you, I just discussed about the enterprise WSDL, partner WSDL, the Apex WSDL. If you are writing an Apex program and if you want to expose that particular Apex code as a WSDL, use this. If you have something which basically you want to involve in metadata level, okay, let's assume that you have an account object. Inside an account object, there is a standard field called country, okay, and in the country field, basically we do have many pick list values: India, then USA, Russia, I mean all these countries, right? Now you want that particular country pick list values you want to handle from an external system, right? So that time basically you are trying to make some changes on that metadata level, because you are definitely just interfering, or you are just involving that metadata, that account metadata, right? So that time you would be generating the metadata WSDL. So these are the basic the regular WSDL which actually just we use. So once you create this particular enterprise WSDL, what it will happen, it will generate you a WSDL file like this, okay? So for time concern, just I generated this particular WSDL file previously. So what happens, this WSDL file, it contains all the necessary details about my current application. First thing. Second thing is that this WSDL doesn't have I would say a generic terminology. Okay, if you see over here, this particular WSDL is having all the inbuilt mechanism which Salesforce supports. Now, for your better understanding, what I will do, I just this particular WSDL file, I will open a SOAP UI. Okay, so if you just Google it, SOAP UI, what will happen in SOAP UI, if you download, just click on this SOAP. Okay, click on the browse. Okay, and select on this particular WSDL file which just now you generated. So go over here and go over here and go over here and just select that particular WSDL file. I have named it my.org.wsdl.xml. So once you do that, what will happen? It will just come like this. Okay. So once it will come this like this, my.org.wsdl. You can see over here. And when I try to expand, see, all the methods, whatever my application supports as part of web service integration mechanism, actually it describes all of them. What are the major methods? It has major methods like login, like query, like create, update, upsert, delete, everything, whatever you try. Now, first thing first, what is the first mechanism when suppose I have generated the WSDL file, and this particular WSDL file, what I will do, I will give it to the third party system or third party HDFC bank. Okay, I will tell them, boss, this is the WSDL file I generated, take it and hit my application, take my details from my application, whatever you want. So when they will be importing this particular WSDL file inside their application, they will be able to get all these methods inside their applications, which now I do not have the HDFC application, right? So I do have SOAP, but instead of HDFC application, I do have SOAP. So when I tried to generate the same thing, I got it generated through SOAP. And this SOAP, I got to know what are the methods basically are supported by this WSDL file. Remember, these all methods are very, very important. And you have to remember that what method does what. Okay, delete, you can simply assume that it basically deletes. Whenever this method will be called, some records would got deleted inside our Salesforce. When login will be called, that means it is for authentication. It is for establishing the connection with our Salesforce. Let's go through this login first. Okay, so let me go to login and request. Okay, so in the login request, what they will ask basically a user ID and the password. All you need to do, you need to give your user ID over here, your Salesforce login user ID, nothing but this particular login application's user ID. Okay, and the corresponding password over here. Okay, once you give that and you just edit this particular point, edit current, and give the URL, whatever you are giving over here. Okay, the same URL, give it to here. Okay, once you do that, then you try to hit it. Okay, once you hit this, you can see there are various of details actually coming. From where these details are coming? These are all coming from this application, because I am hitting this application, I am hitting with this username, I am hitting with this password, which are all mean for this particular application. When I am getting all the details, remember the first and foremost important thing is the session ID. Okay, this session ID, you remember I told you about the contract. One time the contract will establish, and after that, this particular session ID will take care of every other touch or every other integration. So I got this particular session ID. Okay, so what happened, this session ID got generated, and while session ID got generated, let's assume that now what I want from the third party system or from the HDFC system, I want to create, or I want to update, or I want to delete some data in my Salesforce. How I can do that? let's take this particular session ID. Okay, so just copy this simple session ID. Guys, this session ID is having all the details. It has all your username, it has all your password, it has all the details, whatever you want as per the authorization perspective, authentication perspective. Okay, so if you take this particular session ID, guys, and if you go over here, if you just go to, let's assume a create. Okay, so what I want to create a particular case. Let's assume I want to create a case. Okay, so what I'll do, I'll give this particular session ID over here, control V. Okay, once I do that, give the case all the details. So these are the things which I haven't done anything. It's all generated through the WSDL file. It's all okay. I didn't care that what it is basically generated, but when it is basically generated, then I have to give the details. Okay, what should be my case origin, what is the case description, and what is the case subject, and all these things, right? So let's assume that I have given my third test for soap, and let's assume I've given for web this one, and soap second test details. Okay, so and after that, try to hit this particular application. Okay, let's assume this is my HDFC application instead of soap, and I want from my HDFC application this particular details to be created inside my Salesforce. Hit that. Once you hit that, see here the success. Remember, always the success should come as true. That means your request from the HDFC application to the Salesforce system got everything perfectly processed, and basically you got an ID. Okay, so this ID actually came back from my this particular application. That means this is the response. So this is a request, this is a response, this is a synchronous, and this is all the details which basically you received. Okay, so take this particular ID and go to your application and just type this ID, enter. Okay, once you hit that, you should get all this particular new case got generated. Let's see whether our case got generated or not. Okay, you got it, right? So this is the case number. If you want the case number as a response, you just make some changes. Okay, so I do have 10 minutes. Okay, so and apart from that, you do have this particular case name, just soap second test details, right? So whatever basically I have requested, this is the soap second test details. D and E are in caps, and D and E are in caps. So this is what basically the SOAP request comes, and the SOAP basically the response goes. So remember, whenever you will be dealing with the WSDL file, the WSDL files works with the SOAP protocols. Okay, the SOAP protocols basically looks like this, the request and the response look like this. Okay, I can go into a little bit deeper, but I don't think so the time will permit. So I would be ending my session over here. I'll continue the same session tomorrow. Let me ask you, do have any questions? We do have another 10 minutes before we get out from Zoom. And if you have any question, any doubt, just shoot it out. So far, whatever I have described, whatever I have told. Hello?
Yeah, that's great. Looks like
basically, yeah, I might not be able to complete that, but yes, by tomorrow, basically, I will be covering them all. But, let me know that what are the questions, what are the concerns you have.
looks like no one has questions, so probably we can close and we can start resume tomorrow.
Hey, Prason this
Nobody
side.
has any question?
Am I audible?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is the example you shown here. Using this, we are hitting or updating the data in the Salesforce application.
That's
The
right.
same way, if we want to update or create the data in other application that is other than Salesforce, then how this SOAP will work? It is the same way,
Yeah.
like
Yeah. So for
okay. In
that,
that case, what?
basically, Yeah, that's a very good question actually, Professor. So what happened, this is a case which basically Salesforce is generating the WSDL. Salesforce is providing the WSDL to the third party system. That's correct. But what happened, so this is basically the request is coming to Salesforce and Salesforce is responding back with the login, authentication, they create the request, everything. But so that means it is the request is coming towards Salesforce. It is an inbound. Your question is specific to outbound. What happened when you want to create a particular request from Salesforce to the other application? So the same fashion, Prashun, what you have to ask? You have to ask a WSDL file from the other system. Okay, because this case you would be considering outbound integration. The request would be going from Salesforce towards the other application. When the outbound integration will happen, you have to ask the WSDL file from the third party system. Once you receive the WSDL file, import it inside your Salesforce. Once you import it, what will happen? It will generate a stub Apex class. It will generate all the details, generate all the methods. Like you see over here, all this type of, not this type of things. What the third party system defined their methods, it will all comes into our Salesforce application. Once those things will come, just you process that. You write down an Apex class, you can write down, you can configure a flow, you can configure in process builder and use those particular methods and hit their application. Is it good? Does it answer your question?
Yes, that answers. So how can we import that other third parties WSDL in Salesforce?
Go to your this particular setup, Prashun. Okay, so if you go and sorry, I'm sorry. So go here, and inside the setup, if you just go to the Apex class, okay. So inside the Apex class, there is a button called Generate from WSDL. Okay. So if you go to that particular option, just import the WSDL from there. So you just go to the Apex class, okay, and inside the Apex class, go here. Let it load my super fast application. And here you go. Generate from WSDL.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Any more question?
I'm good, thank you.
Any question about SOAP? Any question about web services? Any question about API? So far, whatever we have discussed. Or all you people understood? Is it clear? Very much clear? Little clear? Anything?
One question sent from my side. This is Rupa.
Yeah, Rupa, tell me.
Yeah. So in this case, like when the third party system gives us the visual file, then in that case, how would we get the session ID? Will they provide us the session ID or
So see, so that time basically you have to ask them, okay, hey, which particular method I should call. So assume that when you would be importing the WSDL file from the third party system, right? Once you import that, it will automatically generate some stub class or some methods like this, right? So when this particular methods or all those things got created, you have to ask them that, boss, which particular method actually gives me the session ID details. So they will help you. So the integration means it cannot be, it cannot be configured or developed by a single party, right? Because it is involved with the two parties, right? So that time you have to ask them that which method I should call. Once they will tell that, yeah, you call this particular method, we will return you back with the session ID, okay? So all you care about that particular method. Once you hit their method, they would be all responsible to generate the session ID and return you back. Capture that session ID, use that session ID inside your class, inside your process builder, inside your flows, inside your whatever the configuration or the programmatic syntax, and then hit their application.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Yeah, and one more thing, I mean, we have heard a lot of things like refresh token, access token. Is there a difference between these two? Like,
See, the refresh token and access token, that depends actually. Okay, so what happens inside a Salesforce basically,
And then you have 2 minutes left.
the thing is that for other systems tokens policy, we have to always ask them what are the token policy boss you are maintaining. Okay, because in our Salesforce, if you use our Salesforce token in case of any inbound integration, that means that we can set it. We can set that particular token to be used for all the time, right? Because we can set that token will be never expired or something like that. But when we will use their token, that time we have to ask their policy that how the token should be valid.
So basically, Rupa,
It's all depends. But if it is a sale,
so
yeah,
when
go ahead.
yeah, when first time you will get the access token. After that, when because it's normally expire in specific time, probably 20 minutes or 30 minutes. So after that, you got the token, you have to refresh again to get the request or the process the request. So every time you will not ask for the that normally you go to Google, they will prompt you for the user credential. Okay, once the credential is done, only that time you will get the token. So for that process, we will not go every time. Internally, background from the refresh token, we will create a access code.